Hello, marriage champions. I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the San Antonio Marriage Initiative, and I am so thrilled today to introduce Toni Nieuwhof. She is the author of Before You Split, Find What You Really Want for the Future of Your Marriage. Toni writes from her rare perspective as one who has spent decades as a trained attorney while being married to a pastor. Toni remains refreshingly transparent about her past marital difficulties. She speaks at events and hosts podcasts that foster marriage and family. Toni and her husband, Carrie, live an hour north of Toronto in Canada and have two grown sons. Thank you so much for being here, Toni.
Hey, Amy, I am thrilled to join you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm just thinking that you're in Canada and we're in South Texas. There's a lot of road in between us, and I wonder if the weather is different there than it is here today.
Well, we have just gone through a heat wave, which might have made our weather more similar to yours. But now it's broken. We have nice, like low 80s sunny weather right now. So we're loving it.
Oh, well, I will join you in the sunshine. That that is my favorite always. Well, Toni, in your book, you really share your personal story and you get down really into the emotions of things. What motivated you to write this book?
Amy, I would say there were a couple of motivations, and I think the part that really prompted this was my practice as a divorce attorney. So as I sat across from people and walked through their difficult journey of divorce, I had a few clients who came back to me, and remember one man in particular who looked at me with tears in his eyes. He had three kids. He was a businessman. And he said, if only I'd known then what I know now, I would have worked harder to save my marriage. And in addition to that, my husband, Carrie, and I went through a long struggle, just a vicious cycle of conflict that we seemed to get stuck in. And we had resentment and bitterness, and even reached the place of contempt at one point. And I could easily have imagined myself being somebody sitting in my client's chair. And when I put those two perspectives together, when I saw what people went through after divorce and heard their stories of disappointment, and when I thought about the struggles that Carrie and I went through, but we managed to take a journey that led us out of that bad place in our marriage to a far better place. I thought I could help people at least see what their options are more clearly, and also provide some solutions, some of the solutions to common problems that I saw other people struggle with, and we had also struggled with.
Well, I love that you talk about some of those steps. I know that was kind of an important thing, and you had kind of a life quote that brought that. Could you talk about that? About how you felt what you saw and what you created to help people?
Sure. Yeah, it's I would say when Carrie and I hit the lowest point, we really needed help. We needed to rely on mentors in our lives, and also Christian counselor who came alongside us and helped us to gain a better understanding of what was underneath all the conflict that we were experiencing. And I would say it was multifaceted. So the steps we took were also many and varied. But I think that in fundamentally, we both had to make that transition from the perspective of, this is my perspective is the normal one. What's wrong with you? Also, just having attitudes that were really more full of pride and more closed to a posture that was more characterized by humility and more teachable and open. But we also had to pay attention to some of the ways that we'd experienced trauma in our past, even before we got into marriage. And along with those things, we had to look at our expectations, some of our expectations that weren't realistic. We had to do some work to adjust them, and ways that we responded to each other emotionally. We had to work through that. We had to gain some better peacemaking skills. We needed to find better ways of owning our own behavior and apologizing to each other. So, Amy, to answer your question, I think we went through many different steps, many different solutions, and over time, we're just grateful that they led us to such a better place in our marriage.
Well, I know you really unpack some of those steps in the book, and you've even created kind of a little cheat sheet, a resource. I think it was the Better Future Roadmap, that's available on your website, that just shows kind of the turns in the road of where you can choose to take a positive step, or you can choose to kind of stay stuck. I know stuck was one of the words that you kind of camped on a little bit in the book. So that's something people could check out at your website, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We created that map as a tool so that when somebody's reading through the book and happens to, come upon a solution that really feels relevant and relatable, then that one action step is something that they may want to focus on in the next little while. And it certainly doesn't have to follow the order of the chapters. I think we laid it out as a road with twists and turns that does take people through the chapters of the book. But with this tool, you can start anywhere, and even pick one step as a focus for as long as it takes, for a few weeks, for a few months, and then go on and pick another step. But yeah, it's meant to be a way that you can commit something to writing. I know for some people, and for me included, when I have something in writing that I can go back to, it
Right.
just helps remind me. And you can leave it on the kitchen counter. It can be a reminder in your everyday life, what it is you wanted to focus on right now.
Well, and another one of those resources that you had is maybe one of those action steps as well. It was the conflict resolution cheat sheet. How do you think that's helpful?
Well, I think there are ways that we can pick up habits when we're in conflict that aren't helpful. Things like a common one is blame. It's defaulting to that core belief or perspective that it's mainly my spouse's fault. And In addition to that, some of the language we use isn't helpful. When we say things like "you never" or "you always," instead of just starting what you say with "I," like "I feel X when you do this," then that can easily dissolve into blame and finger pointing, and an argument that just tends to go around in circles. So yes, peacemaking and learning better ways of moving through your conflict is so valuable.
Well, and you were a trained mediator. So that was, with all your experience with the other couples that you saw. I'm sure that helped you develop some of these resources.
Absolutely. And you mentioned mediation. One of the ways that we help people move through conversations, when there's a lot of hard feelings, or if there's binary positions, people are feeling polarized, is to help people take a step back, take a deep breath, uh, make sure you stay away from insulting, or any ways that you might tear your partner down while you're going through conflict, but focusing instead on what's the why underneath what we're talking about. Because sometimes I think people get caught up in the how or the what, but if you can take it back to what's really valuable here, what are the values that I am focusing on right now? What are the values that you are focusing on right now? And when couples can get into that space and try to not be as reactionary and not be as quick to voice their own opinion instead of listening, then conversations tend to go better.
Well, I like that. And two, another thing that really impressed me about your book was, I know as a lawyer, and just, the reality is when a couple is in conflict like that, oftentimes there's one partner who is more interested in reconciliation than the other. And your book really offered some room there for the person and some reasons to really give a hard look at their marriage, whether or not they were super interested in reconciling.
Mm.
Can you kind of unpack that a little bit and describe that?
Sure. Yeah. I remember what it was like to feel stuck and even ambivalent about my relationship. I mean, Carrie and I, we can joke about it being a 10-year argument now that we are on the other side. But at the time, it was no joke. And we did reach the point where I wondered, is this what the end looks like? It feels like damage control. If I stay, am I signing up for a lifetime of misery? But if I go, then I know that there are all these consequences and all these issues I'm going to have to deal with. And so it's hard to be in that stuck place. It's hard to work on a relationship that you're not quite sure, at least emotionally, that you want to invest in. But if, especially if you have kids, you may decide to leave your partner, but you're not going to be able to leave as co-parents. For many people, you will have to go through some negotiating of how you're going to raise your kids together as parents when your marriage relationship isn't holding you together anymore. And um, and so I like to encourage people to right now, when you're in that stuck place, maybe put the decision about what happens with your relationship to the side and step back and take a look at what is it that I am bringing to the marriage problems. Because I think one of the common pitfalls I saw, Amy, when I was practicing as a divorce attorney was that people had left their marriage and really did feel like it's my spouse's fault. And, they could list the reasons why it was mainly their spouse's fault. The thing is that, we humans are pain avoidant. So we naturally will try to avoid our own part. And yet, who are you going to take into your next relationship? You're going to take yourself. And so if you haven't taken the time and made the effort to gain some self-awareness, then chances are the problems that you're experiencing right now, that part of which does rest with you, you're going to bring along with you. But on the other hand, the more insight you can gain and the more cooperative you can become in your relationship with your partner, again, regardless of what happens with your marriage, the more cooperative and kind and respectful you can be to each other, the more your kids are going to benefit so much. It will protect their childhood, will help their emotional sense of safety and security. And even if that is the motivation, I mean, you can take steps to become more self-aware, to have a better way of bringing love into relationships, rather than being affected by your blind spots and not aware of them. Then you will become a better version of yourself, a more loving version of yourself for all your relationships. And in the process, maybe, just maybe, the work that you do on your own personal growth will actually have an influence on your spouse, will actually have an influence on your marriage. And you may find that your marriage starts to transition just because you decided to look inward rather than pointing the finger at your spouse.
Yeah, I remember you said something, slow is your friend when it comes to considering a divorce.
Yes, and I did say that in the context of parents who have kids, because here's the thing: I worked with parents who had decided to divorce, and often when they came to me, that decision had already been made 2 or 3 years ago, and they had tried to work out the arrangements. It hadn't worked out, and so they were turning to lawyers for help. At least in my geographic area, that was typically the way that that would unfold. And when parents were in the negotiations about who the kids are going to live with and for how much time and how are they going to make decisions about education and healthcare and all those issues, um, where they hadn't worked on whatever it was that had dragged their relationship down and caused them to decide to split, was still there. And 2 or 3 years after they'd made the decision to split, it was a tough sell for many couples, to invest time and energy and resources in working on their relationship. And yet, in many cases, they needed to do that for the sake of their kids. And so I tell parents and married people that if you are in a tough place right now, there's really no better time to go and seek some help. Turn to a counselor, go to a pastor, but seek some help to see what you can do to improve your relationship, because you will probably not be in a position in the future where you have more time or more opportunity than you do right now.
Yeah. I know you had mentioned like people being in your office and having regrets, or kind of having a pie in the sky idea of what their life after their divorce might be, when they're not really thinking about their daughter's wedding or becoming elderly. And if you don't have a spouse, if you're alone, who takes care of you when you're 80 and you need some help? And people don't think through that. Did You'd mentioned some regrets. Did you have an example or something that you could share with us about that?
Sure. Yes. I there was a couple who had a young child, 3 years old, and before separating, they had a conversation where dad was saying, "Well, Bobby, I'll call him Bobby. Bobby can live with you full time, and I will see him on weekends." And then the date of separation came, and uh, it's experienced as a new day, like as a different day for many couples. So that even when they've had these conversations beforehand, then the separation actually happens and the reality sinks in. And so at that point, both mom and dad wanted as much time with Bobby as possible, understandably. And so where mom was thinking that she was primarily going to be the custodial parent for Bobby, um, that's not what her husband wanted after they decided to split. And so they weren't able to go through the negotiations without the assistance of a judge. They needed to go to court. They, it was a hard um, court case because mom was so blindsided by the change that dad was asking for. And yet, what dad was asking for was very reasonable and supportable by the law, just according to how their family life had been before they separated. So, and there's many, many other examples, but that's just one example that is just so close to the heart because let's face it, you're dealing with your kids.
Well, and you had mentioned too that while you're still, like you said, putting the marriage on hold, thinking about maybe working on improving some of your communication skills and just relationship skills, because you're going to need those skills. And you had mentioned going to your pastor or maybe to a marriage ministry. I know we have a lot of champions out here listening to us. How can you, I know you've taken the book, you also you do some conferences and things. How can people use this to kind of jumpstart some of the work they're doing in their ministries?
I've heard from many couples that they've read through the book together. And so, if you have a couple that is willing to do that, there are a few questions to stimulate to stimulate a deeper level of conversation at the end of each chapter. And yeah, and as well, there's a tool on my website called the Accountability Plan, and it's meant to help people work toward getting on the same page with adjusting unrealistic expectations. So I would say absolutely, if a couple is willing to work on it together, there's so many practical solutions and ideas that couples can try out for themselves. But even if you are working with a couple and only one person is willing to read the book, it's still going to be helpful.
So, as a marriage ministry, I know we had talked and you had mentioned you and your husband created like a four-part series where you talked about this and kind of unpacked some of the book. Is that something that you were doing live and are still doing live, or is that something that you taped and make and is available? What's the status on that now?
That is a great question. So, yes, Amy, I did create a series. It's a video and workbook series. Um, Now it was available as a pre-order bonus for the book, so it's not commercially available right now. We felt that we needed to redo some of the video, and so that is going to be available, but it probably won't be until the fall.
But that's great because we at Sammy, that's what we do, is continue to have relationships with leaders like you who have such good, resources and have such good information to share. So that will be great because we will be able to circle back around with anyone here who's interested. We'll keep in touch and we'll be able to help you launch that when that happens. So that'll
Oh,
be
well,
great.
thank you. Thanks. It's called the Six Things Unhappy Couples Say and What to Do About Them.
Yeah, because I remember when we talked, you were giving that at your church, I believe, as a sermon series. So that'll be really.
Oh, okay. I am so sorry. Yes. Carrie and I have done a sermon series at Connexus Church, and Connexus is Connexus Church. Uh, the on-demand videos give replays of all the messages. And this series was a 4-week series that started on February 14th, on Valentine's Day this year in 2021. So yeah, that is freely available for anyone who wants to hear about marriage from a Christian perspective.
Oh, that's wonderful. That would be really helpful. And that's interesting. You brought up the date, Valentine's Day of 2021. While you all were at church doing a sermon series, we were in San Antonio having the snowpocalypse. So we got
Oh,
you since you
oh
were
no.
got the Canadian Arctic blast and had very cold temperatures and unusual snow for this whole region. So that date is forever burned in infamy in the south of the south of the U.S. So
Oh, I'm sorry if we were responsible for that.
I love it. I love it. Can you think of any other ways a marriage ministry might be able to connect with you? Other ways that could use your resources to really help someone?
Sure. I do some speaking, Amy. So if anyone's looking for a speaker to address marriage, just reach out. My website is ToniNieuwhof.com, and I'd be thrilled to hear from you.
Awesome. Any other biggest aha moment or takeaway that really made the difference for you?
I'd like to highlight when Carrie and I were at the lowest point. of our marriage. I really didn't know what the future would hold. And I wondered whether it was even possible for us to ever be in love again. And that's a scary place to be. What I'd like to offer people is hope, that even when you reach the point where you're feeling disconnected or you feel like you've drifted apart and you wonder where the love has gone, there are specific things you can do. There are steps you can take to rekindle that bond. And there are things like paying attention to the ratio of positive versus negative communications you're sharing with each other, things like shared experiences, things like being intentional about how you're sharing power and being influenced by each other. There's so many things that you can do that will actually draw you closer. And I just want to say that we went through that terrible, even gut-wrenching season. But now we've been married 31 years, and I would not have known how much joy and love I would have been walking away from if I had left my marriage in that, when it was in that tough season. So I want to offer that as hope. But Amy, I do also want to say that there are some cases, some marriages where there's harmful stuff going on. There's either toxic or violent behavior. And if somebody's in a harmful marriage, I really would encourage them to reach out to someone you trust, a doctor, a counselor, a pastor, and have a conversation about making a safety plan. Because I don't want to encourage anyone who's in a harmful position to stay in harm's way.
I really appreciate that you said that. I know in your book there was a definition of what is harmful versus what is, just distressing and emotionally difficult. And I think that's really an important distinction to make, because there
Mm,
are times when, like you said, a safety plan is necessary. So
mm,
thank you for saying that. That is really
mm.
good. Um, on a lighter note, you had mentioned one of the things as step to build rapport and build that connection with your spouse was shared experiences. I know we both laughed a little bit about some of the things that you like to do with your husband that have kind of built once you were moving forward to spending that quality fun time together. Um, do you want to tell one of your fun experiences? I know we both had some that we shared with our respective
Sure.
husband.
Yeah, sure. Well, at the beginning, Carrie decided to take up snowshoeing. I love snowshoeing, and so he took one for the team and went out snowshoeing, and he really didn't enjoy it at the beginning, but now he loves it. And I decided to take up road cycling. So, in that first season of road cycling, it was my first time ever having my shoes clipped in to the pedals. That's road cyclists typically have that kind of bike. And I fell not once, not twice, but 5 times in my first season because I kept forgetting that my feet were clipped in. So, season
Oh,
two, season two, I spent a lot of time cycling thinking my feet are clipped, my feet are clipped, my feet are clipped.
I love that.
Oh, but now it's something that we love doing together.
I love that you both decided to try something that was maybe outside of your comfort zone. And then with that shared experience, it brought you closer together. And you can even see how the delight and the smile on your face, and also maybe inspirational for others. I don't know if I would have been willing to fall 5 times. You're,
Fortunately, it was on gravel and grass, not pavement.
oh, ouch. Ouch. Well, Toni, it's been so wonderful getting to talk to you today. I think we've really cast a lot of vision for some hope, and also found people, ways that they can connect with you to learn more. So thank you again for being our guest. It's just a pleasure
Oh,
getting to talk with you.
Amy, it's an honor and a privilege. So thank you. And thank you for all that you and the SAMI organization, am I saying that right? SAMI, the
San Antonio,
organization are doing to support people with their marriages. It's wonderful.
well, thank you. Yes, San Antonio Marriage Initiative, and you can find us at samarriage.org. So that'll have all the ways to connect with Toni that have been flashing on the screen, but they'll be there. So thank you again, Toni. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Bye,
you.
bye, marriage champions. Thanks for tuning in.